kind of looking at the defensive line. Obviously, the transfer from Tulane, Jeffrey Johnson, will make a big impact. I think most people that I've talked to think he's a guy that plays with tremendous technique. Maybe he's not the most athletic guy in the world, but he's very strong, plays with really good technique, and is very very coachable. So I think he's a guy that's probably going to start along that defensive line. If not, would certainly get a lot of playing time. Jonah Laulu, the transfer from Hawaii, will I think his body type gives him an opportunity to be a guy that could probably either play inside or outside from a defensive end. He's a 6'7" kid, so has the height, and I think the levers that you would look to from a defensive end perspective. So that's another guy. Even though this guy's not really a freshman, he's a redshirt freshman. I would say Clayton Smith would be a guy that would get a decent amount of playing time coming off the edge. For Oklahoma, actually has heard that he's coming into the spring. I think Oklahoma was a little bit, I think, nervous. Coaches were a little bit nervous. Maybe they didn't feel like they had a ton of playmakers really at the edge position. And I think once they got the pads on Saturday, they found out they got a couple more kids that have, I don't know that I would say separated themselves, but have kind of pronounced themselves and feel like that they've got a little bit more athleticism and a little bit more kids that can play and make a difference immediately. From a linebacker, moving to the linebacker, I think you've got Jaren Koenig that will play a decent amount. Could definitely see him starting. Just kind of, it's very hard to see how to know exactly how Venables will kind of set that set that defense up. They're going to be extremely multiple. You'll see you'll see some 3-3-5, you'll see some 4-2-5, you'll see some base 4-3. You might even see some 3-3-5 stuff out of Oklahoma. So kind of depending on what that looks like, I think you'll see him in the game. He is, I think, from an athletic perspective, he kind of fits that Isaiah Simmons role where he's a little bit of a hybrid linebacker, and he can run in space, so he can play kind of a safety, more nickel situation. So it'd be interesting to see how he progresses through the spring and obviously throughout the summer and when fall comes along. TD Roof is another guy from Appalachian State that figures to be in the mix a little bit in the linebacker. I don't know that he will. I don't know that he will be able to kind of unseat Deshaun White, at that will linebacker position. But he is a guy that will play a decent amount from what I've heard. And I think Mark probably for my own kind of 2 cents, I think one of the most interesting. I think the most interesting comparison or battle that we're going to see is at one of the cornerback positions. I think you've got a guy by Woody Washington that will play a decent amount. He'll start. I think he's about as entrenched as a starter as you'll hear right now, other than maybe Dylan Gabriel at this point. So I think, but the other spot you've legitimately got 5 or 6 guys that could potentially be a starter on the other side. The incumbent is DJ Graham, played really, really well last year, had an absolute awful Alamo Bowl. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he comes back from that from a confidence perspective. But you've got DJ Graham, you've got a transfer CJ Coldon from Wyoming, not coming in until the summer, which that puts him a little bit behind the 8 ball. But I think his experience and his playing time that he's had at Wyoming will help him. And then you've got Connie Walker, who's a guy that was a little bit. He was one of the the 3 or 4 guys that transferred in from a defensive back perspective coming in, and I think he was a guy that was a little bit lost in the shuffle, just in terms of. He's only a guy that's played a little bit 1 year at Louisville, but I think he's a guy that Venables talked about in this press conference a couple of days ago. Really, really a guy who is incredibly athletic, and is a guy that's, I think, surprised even a lot of people. I think coming in early. So I think you look at that position, obviously you're going to see Cold on. I think you're going to see Connie Walker, play for some reps there. And then when you go to the nickel position, I think, I think you've got a guy from North Carolina, Trey Morrison, who is again, he's playing a little bit handicapped right now. He's got a little thing with his hand, so he's playing in a cast, but I think they like what they have what they have in him, and I think he's a guy that will probably play. At this point, I would probably peg him as a starter, and at the nickel position. So those are the guys that I think, both freshmen and transfers, that will have a chance to either start or have a pretty good impact here early on for Oklahoma this year.
Yeah, Trey Morrison in particular has a ton of experience. He racked up 44 games. 44 games, most of those starts at North Carolina, coming off a 47 tackle season. He's racked up 163 tackles in 4 seasons, 11 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 2 picks, and again, 44 games played, and just about all of them starts. He pretty much started out of the gate 46 tackles as a freshman in 11 games. So those are starters numbers for a cornerback position to be in the 40, 45 range in numbers of tackles. You have to think that he was on the field most of the time.
Yeah.
And so, and with Colden out of Wyoming, he had 67 tackles last year, played a ton of football. So they get experienced guys. Now, as you mentioned, Walker, not so much out of Louisville, but certainly he will get his shot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mark, I think you've got 3 guys that you can really point to, that you think coming in are going to start in the secondary in some position, with Woody Washington, and then you've got Key Lawrence, and then you've obviously got Trey Morrison again, from a nickel perspective. So I think the good thing about Trey Morrison, as you've mentioned, with the kind of the experience that he has, I think you can probably see him. If he needs to play corner, he can. If he needs to play nickel, if he needs to play free safety, he can. So I think that gives Oklahoma a little bit of flexibility in the defensive backfield. But I think that competition is going to be maybe a little bit even more fierce than it's been in the past. There was some Venables talked a lot about Billy Bowman the other day as well. Took a little bit of shot at the previous um, at the previous coaching staff, just talking about how much of it was how he was stretched so thin, had to play so many positions, last year, and never really got to go really in depth on one position. And they've got him focused on free safety